This one provides for a third internationally recognised humanitarian symbol in conflict, the red crystal, to go with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. So Australia has signalled its support for that. Whoopie-doos. Welcome indication, indeed, of Australia's continuing commitment to the Geneva Principles. So why doesn't Australia do anything to stand up for them when they're actually at stake? You know, I've read, I would recommend people read, it's easily available, the US State Department report. The US State Department report. This is not the view of some, you know, obscure academic in a dusty office, or some left-wing group hustle selling papers outside a public meeting. Oops, sorry. This is the US State Department, and they document no fewer than 158 credible reports of shelling of civilian areas by the Sri Lankan military. They are right to point out a notable piece of journalism, actually, by Al Jazeera Television, which was interviewing the foreign minister, who claimed that no shelling of this particular area had taken place. There was an area which was depicted in aerial photographs, and he was claiming no shelling had taken place there. Actually, they then played a previous interview with him where he had maintained that they had been shelling the area, but that was before there were any people there. So they caught him out making a contradictory statement. And unfortunately, that's all too rare. That's all too rare, you know. I mean, there was quite a decent item on Late Night last night. Possibly people saw it. ABC Late Night, which did the useful job of bringing us pictures of the appalling conditions caused by the floods at the Manik Farm internment camp, where many thousands of Tamils are being locked up in contravention of international law and Sri Lankan law, and against their human rights. It featured an interview with somebody who'd been in one of the camps, who was speaking about conditions there, and it was all very useful. And perfectly legitimately, it heard from the Sri Lankan High Commissioner as well. What's missing is context. What's missing is context, and any indication to point out the lengthy and dismal record of mendacity by the government this gentleman represents. Chris referred to these white vans, not the least of the fears confronting people held in these camps is, and this is one of many grounds, one of several grounds, for them to have a well-founded fear of persecution and therefore be bona fide refugees. Not the least of their concerns is the prospect that they might simply disappear overnight. And so many thousands of Sri Lankans have disappeared overnight over the years. Commissions of inquiry have been set up, investigations have been set up by the Sri Lankan government. Scarcely a one has identified anybody responsible and brought them to justice. That's why Amnesty International calls that process a sham. Calls that process a sham. And that's why Navi Pillai, Judge Navi Pillai, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, made a call last June, actually, in June of this year, several months ago, for the requisite international organisations to carry out proper, professional human rights and humanitarian reporting work among those Tamils in those camps, and to provide adequate standards of food, water, sanitation and medical care. She also called for an independent, impartial investigation of war crimes allegations on all sides. Now, those allegations, we can't know the truth of them because they haven't been properly investigated. One of the excuses the Sri Lankan government as to why the thousands of people will have to remain locked up in these camps is because they say the areas to which they would like to return are actually infested by unexploded mines, and these mines are in the process of being cleared. On the other hand, reports leak out, and again, we have no means of verifying these, that the real reason why they're being kept there is because the Sri Lankan military is busy clearing up evidence of the war crimes it committed when it was bombarding those areas. And the here in Australia of President Rajapaksa in his re-election campaign. And this is a list of people being asked to do what they can here in Australia to raise money for this campaign and to rally support. This email begins, this is from a person called Janaka Pereira, who I don't know. The email begins, the one major reason I would support President Rajapaksa is that I believe he would not allow Sri Lanka's military victory over the LTTE to be turned into a camouflage defeat in the name of devolution of powers leading to ethnic enclaves under pressure from the so-called international community, the UK, USA, Canada and the European Union. So what that means is that Sri Lanka is busy gerrymandering those areas in a bid to extinguish the Tamil political identity by citing military checkpoints, military installations, Buddhist temples, setting aside land for use by the Sinhala majority community in those areas to try to break up that particular political identity. And these are reports that are coming out, and again, they need to be followed up and properly investigated, that there is a kind of ethnic cleansing going on in those areas, and that is why those people are being kept from returning to them. These are serious allegations indeed, and I mean, one of the reasons why we can't get to the bottom of them is because of Sri Lanka's dismal record on press freedom. In the recently published Index of Press Freedom by Reporters Without Borders, Sri Lanka languishes at number 162 out of 175, precisely because of the long and ignoble campaign of intimidation, harassment and unsolved murders that Chris refers to. So, all in all, a highly unsatisfactory situation. Australia has no business cozying up to these people when these allegations are hanging over them, and they have resisted all attempts to investigate them properly. Instead, Australia should be joining. We're not calling for Australia to initiate something. Australia doesn't have to be the tall poppy here. Australia is being called upon to join the existing international effort to try to uphold some of these principles, basic principles of human rights and humanitarian protection. You know, we're not asking them to get into bed, you know, with the Tamil Liberation Party. We're asking them to get into bed with the US State Department. You know, it's not some bunch of kind of green consumer activists led by someone like Ralph Nader who is saying don't trade with Sri Lanka until they clean up their act. It's the European Union. Okay, so Australia is the one which is at the moment the scab state. Australia is the refuge. You know, Australia is the one that is turned to host, as a couple of weeks ago here in Melbourne, a kind of a shindig, advertising the joys of tourism in Sri Lanka in these circumstances. You know, Australia is the one which is inviting Australians, its own citizens, to contemplate with a straight face going on holiday to Sri Lanka while these allegations remain uninvestigated. So, altogether, a most unsatisfactory situation. What can we do? Continue to keep up all the pressure we can, obviously, but ultimately, what I was saying at the outset about this problem of triangulation and the fact that it means our political system is not working properly might even lead us to consider, shall we say, more wide-ranging responses. You know, it's not for me to initiate such a move because I was proud recently to become a permanent resident of Australia. I'm not yet a citizen of Australia, so I don't have a vote. If I did have a vote, I would be threatening to withhold it. And I would be saying, unless you start behaving like the proper Labour Party, we're going on strike. I'll leave you with that.
Thanks, Jake. Speaking as a journalist, the thing that struck me about the media coverage of the events of February of this year was how lacking in detail they were, and how there was no serious coverage of the conflict in those final weeks. And the excuse that was given by the media was that effectively this is still an extension of the war on terror. The LTTE is a terrorist organisation, and therefore we can't take seriously any of their claims.